All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages, I am Beast Mike, and you've now arrived at my train of thoughts. I'm also going to try to ask the question, where do we go from here? So, I know I'm way late with this, but I'm going to try to condense it to some degree. And in this series, I know I've done this 2x2, but this time, it's kind of perfect timing because I effectively stopped when it came to the playoff teams. I didn't get to any of them, and they're the only 14 left. And for the next 3 videos I'm going to focus on the wild card eliminated teams, and then the divisional round eliminated teams, and then the teams that went to the conference championship and further. So 3 videos, 6 teams in this one, 4 teams in the next one, 4 teams in the last one. And then that's how this series will end for this year. Like I was going to do if I had kept this up 2x2 every day, it's going to be an order of elimination. The lower your seed when you were eliminated, the earlier you shall go. Let's focus on the wildcard teams first. We're going to start in Los Angeles with the Rams. And it feels like when it comes to Los Angeles, they're hybrid of high-end talent that helped them win the Lombardi, that's still there, and the youth movement of their daycare center style picks really helped them flourish. They did pretty well with the picks they had. Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua were excellent. Nacua effectively could take the torch from Cooper Kupp, who was good, not great. I know injuries were kind of part of the reason why that was the case, but they were productive, and they were solid together as a receiver group. Actually, they were great, I should say. I'm kind of underselling it. They were great together as a receiver duo. Kyron Williams was an all-pro as well, as Nacua was, at the running back spot. He missed a bunch of games and was still incredibly dominant. Matt Stafford got back to what he was and what the Rams got him for. He was very productive, and there's no shame in losing to the Lions. Detroit was just slightly better. The Rams' defense was efficient. Sure, they could use a little bit of help in the secondary, and they wouldn't address it in free agency, but the Rams are a pretty solid team. Obviously, Aaron Donald is pretty irreplaceable, and for Aaron Donald to retire at the peak of his powers is incredible to see that, and it's a shame he has to wait 5 years to go to the Hall of Fame, but I guess that's the rules. Aaron Donald, we'll see you in Canton, and I'm sure nobody will ever wear the number 99 in Los Angeles for the Rams ever again. The Rams somehow have a first-round pick because for some reason they haven't traded it yet. They have the 19th overall pick in this situation in a couple of weeks. What do the Rams do with it? Do the Rams continue to address their secondary like they've done this offseason when they signed Darius Williams away from Jacksonville, or do they try the seemingly impossible task of trying to replace Aaron Donald? Either way, the fact that the Rams have a first-round pick is rather surprising and maybe somewhat refreshing. It is amazing that Jared Goff is the last guy they drafted in the first round of an NFL draft. Let's get to the Steelers now, and when it comes to Pittsburgh, their high-end talent on defense was all amazing. TJ Watt balled out. When Casey Hayward played, he balled out. When Alex Highsmith played, he balled out. When Minka Fitzpatrick played, he balled out. That seems like a theme. They did all have injuries this past season, and they all came in various ways and at various times of the year. Watt missed the playoff game. Not great. But in any event, the Steelers' defense bailed them out of certain doom, and their run game came along late when Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris really got rolling towards the end of the season. But we all knew the fly in the ointment was the quarterback room and how bad it was, how ineffective it was, how inefficient it was. And all 3 quarterbacks are now gone to various places. They actually had a 3rd-round pick for Kenny Pickett. And they ended up getting 2 quarterbacks who are probably worth more than the prices they are going to get paid in Pittsburgh. They got Justin Fields for free. I guess the official tax was a 6th-round pick, which can be a 4th. And then they got Russell Wilson effectively for free, which is basically $1 million or so, as Denver's going to foot the bill for 38. And that massive dead cat pit that's going to happen in the Mile High City. Anyway, Pittsburgh did some very shrewd movements to kind of give life to the QB room, because if they have life there and with the rest of that roster, Pittsburgh could be in business. Now, don't get it confused, other than the Patrick Queen signing, which was a really shrewd move to kind of weaken your division rival while at the same time adding to a strength, which is your really high-end defense and high-paid defense, because they're all making a whole lot of money. Pittsburgh does have some weaknesses to address. The offensive line is a little unstable, I think is the right word to describe it. They did release their center, and now the question is, how do they replace him? They do have the 20th pick in the draft, and this is an excellent offensive line draft. They could absolutely go that route. Or they could try to replenish the hole that the Deontay Johnson trade left them, as they traded him to the Panthers. This is also a pretty good receiver draft. Could Pittsburgh address one of those needs? Or maybe go to the cornerback room? There's some needs that Pittsburgh could absolutely tend to with this pick. And the Steelers are a team that normally knows how to draft. What will Pittsburgh do with it? Now, the next three teams I'm going to talk about kind of had the bronze, silver, and gold medal of bad or humiliating losses in the wild card round. First, I'm going to talk about the silver medalists across the state from Pittsburgh and the Eagles. And like the next team I'm going to talk about when it comes to this round, it's a matter of they woke up on December 5th with control of the number one seed in their conference. Yes, they got blown out by the Niners, the Eagles did, and we didn't know the fate of Big Dom, who was effectively the muscle behind Nick Sirianni, but we knew that the Eagles had control of the conference. All they had to do was do their part, and the one seed would run through Philadelphia and the Link. They did not do their part. 5 days later, they got rolled by Dallas. Okay, fine, that's humiliating enough. Dallas got their lick back. But then you lost to Drew Lock in Seattle, and a Seattle team that was getting buried by the Niners and was basically treated as a punching bag. The next week, they survived the Giants. I think we'll go with that. They survived the Giants, and they got humiliated by the Cardinals, and then the Giants got their lick back at the end of the season. So a disastrous 1-5 ending to the season, counting the Niner game, and then a mercy killing by the Bucs effectively ended the Eagles' year. It was a horrible end to what looked like a really good season. The first team to go 10-1 and not get to 12 wins. That's saying something. But the Eagles, to be fair to them, I think did some smart and shrewd improvements. I think the biggest reasoning for this demise and collapse was probably play calling and coaching. To address this, Kellen Moore on the offense, Vic Fangio on the defense. Fangio is a very good coordinator. I think a lot of Dolphin fans would tell you this. He's a good coordinator. The problem is, he does get stubborn, and is a bit of a my way or highway type of coach. And if you're in his doghouse, you may never get out. See Cam Smith. And with Kellen Moore, I think we've seen over the years that he does get a little pass happy. And it feels like that's the kind of mantra that the Eagles want on offense, is a bit of a pass happy coordinator. Jalen Hurts, I think, is best when the run game is at the very least balanced with Hurts, and he doesn't really 100% or maybe even 70% have to rely on his arm. Well, Saquon Barkley should help with that. Barkley is an excellent running back when he's at full strength, and not only in his ability to catch the ball at the backfield, but obviously running the ball. The Eagles have an excellent offensive line, and probably the best offensive line he's ever had is coming up with this Eagles team. Unfortunately, the anchor of that line is not going to be there, no matter how hard Saquon Barkley may be trying to convince him to say otherwise. Jason Kelce, like Aaron Donald, probably shouldn't have to wait 5 years to go to the NFL Hall of Fame. He deserves it. He is a Pro Football First Ballot Hall of Famer without question, and the best center of this generation. It's a shame that he'll have to wait these 5 years, but in Canton, when that time comes, he's going to get a major reaction. Similar to what happened at WrestleMania Saturday. That was also quite nice. Anyway, the Eagles' defense is also going a little under a transformation. Hassan Reddick out, and Bryce Huff in. Now, it feels like they're doing with Huff that they tried to do with Reddick. They kind of sort of underpaid him after a good season, and then all of a sudden, they think that Huff will blow up the same way that Reddick did. Will that happen? We'll see. We'll see if Devin White is a product of what he has been in Tampa Bay for his first few years, or is it a matter of, okay, maybe his patience with him wore thin in Tampa, and he was even benched for a game. We'll see how that works, too. I think Devin White will be decent. CJ Gardner-Johnson coming back to bring, I think, some of that swagger that the Eagles defense really did not have this past season, I think is going to absolutely help their cause. There's still some holes on this unit, though. I don't love their back seven, and without Fletcher Cox as well, who might have been one of their better defensive players this past season, with him retiring, I'm not sure that's going to help either up front, unless the Georgia boys can have good full seasons as opposed to good partial seasons. The Eagles have the 22nd pick in the draft, and with that pick, I think the Eagles could address their offensive line. They could certainly address the cornerback room, or maybe even the receiver room. And will this lead to A.J. Brown not being an Eagle for much longer? We don't know. Obviously, with the rumors and the drama with A.J. Brown that has been alleged, we'll see what happens with him. There will be decisions coming up with Devontae Smith and the fifth-year option and things of that nature. That will also be very critical. And now from one Alabama quarterback throwing to one Alabama receiver to another Alabama quarterback throwing to another Alabama receiver. Let's go to Miami. And as a Dolphins fan, it was really cool to see how well they did. I keep mentioning December 5th, where Miami and the Eagles had an opportunity to be the one seed in their respective conference. And I was at the game on December 3rd when Miami buried the Commanders in what was effectively a Dolphins home game. At that point in time, it didn't feel like when the Dolphins were 9-3 that they were going to not only not win the one seed, not only not win the division, but fall all the way down to 6. And then Miami lost 3 of 5 to lose out and had that exact fate happen to them. Now, part of that, in their case, was a whole lot of injuries, but really the Titans game, there's really no excuse for that. That was a terrible loss. Injuries did, as I mentioned, hurt this Dolphins team tremendously down the stretch. Losing half your starters for several games at a time will really hamper even the best of teams. And Miami just didn't recover. And by the time they got to the playoffs in Kansas City with a somewhat healthy offense, the Dolphins froze. And it was pretty rough and ugly. When this team was at its peak, this team was rolling. They had the best offense in football for pretty much the entire season. They were number two in points, number 1 in yards. Tua was number 1 in yards passing. Tyreek Hill was number 1 in yards receiving. Raheem Mostert tied for the league lead in touchdowns. They were a dominant offensive unit. They had the best receiver combo in the game. They actually had a top 10 defense as the defense came along later in the year. They were not great against the pass, but yet again, great against the run. Christian Wilkins was a main part of this, but he's gone now. He's gone to the Raiders, and replacing him is going to be hard. He is a top 10 defensive tackle. Miami has replaced with depth, but not household names. They couldn't do the latter thing because of the cap room situation they had. There's another team I'm going to talk about with similar cap struggles that they had, but they've gone about it a little differently. Anyway, Miami had a situation that I kind of turned it into an analogy. Instead of shopping at Whole Foods, Miami had to shop at Aldi. And that's effectively what they did. They went from going high-priced talent and trying to win off seasons, and they kind of done that with Armstead and Tyreek Hill a couple of years ago, to now Miami had to replenish with depth and refill the cupboard with more quantity as opposed to maybe necessarily higher quality. Can Gallimore, Tart, Hand, and some other defensive tackles replace the production of Christian Wilkins? We'll see. Hopefully, for the Dolphins' sake, that Kendall Fuller is going to be able to replace Xavier Howard, who got released in part due to his high salary yet lack of health. Can Shaq Barrett replace Emmanuel Ogbah, who is a good player, but obviously things didn't work out for Ogbah and his health? Can Miami replace Robert Hunt? They really haven't addressed that yet. Robert Hunt is a very good right guard. I would say top 10 at that position. Carolina paid him a lot of money, though. Miami can still address this. And fortunately for them, with the 21st pick, they could absolutely go that route in getting their right guard in the future. Or maybe Teron Armstead's heir apparent. He did take a restructure for his contract. And Armstead, as great as he is, did miss 7 games this past year, which is kind of sort of the norm. Can Miami replace that? Or maybe Miami addresses Christian Wilkins' departure and gets a full-on starting defensive tackle to pair with Zach Sealer, who had an excellent season last year. Maybe the Dolphins go wide receiver 3 and address the whole that after Hill and Waddle, the best receiver combo in the game, there obviously was a massive void between Waddle and the next best receiver, Cedric Wilson. Wilson's now gone. What will the Dolphins do? They don't have a lot of picks, but they do have several needs that need to be addressed. Now, the Dolphins got the bronze medal in terms of bad playoff losses in the wild card round. Dallas, far and away, this is like Usain Bolt challenge, got the gold in terms of humiliating losses in the wild card round. The beating they took from the Packers was ugly. It was bad. It was effectively 48-16 before Dallas got a couple of vanity touchdowns and 2-point conversions. And it was so shocking that I did the game for SiriusXM in Spanish, and in truth, they were stunned in both languages. I mean, it could have been done in French, and they were probably stunned in the French language. What happened to Dallas was so jarring that I would have expected, not scorched earth per se, but a situation where things are entirely different. Maybe no Mike McCarthy, maybe no Dan Quinn. Well, it turns out Dan Quinn's gone anyway. And maybe we started to ask the question, what do you do with Dak? I think you still have to ask that question. There's 1 year left on his deal, and we don't know what they're going to do because Jerry Jones is kind of balking at giving him a long-term deal. To be honest, I understand. And Miami's doing the same with Tua, so I get it. But with Dak, it's a whole lot of money you're already paying him, and now Dak has all the cards. He can basically say, I don't want to go X, Y, or Z, so there's no trade clause. You can't even franchise him either, unlike what Miami can do with Tua. It's a pretty rough situation in that boat. Then there's Micah. What do you do with Micah Parsons? As great as he is as an edge rusher, the word is that his act is getting a little thin in Dallas. Do you trade him? Do you let him walk? What do you do with Micah? And if you trade him, I'm sure you can get a king's ransom for him. He's an outstanding edge rusher. Dallas is in a very rough spot, and they didn't really do anything despite their declarations of going all in. Although Skip Bayless did provide a legendary comma. At least there's that. We did have a pause moment because people decided to omit the comma in various replies. It was hilarious. Eric Kendricks is probably the one major signing, but even that's replacing a departing Leighton Vander Esch, who retired due to his health and his injuries. They are going to have to replace Tyron Smith, who went to the Jets, or maybe Deron Armstrong, who went to the Commanders, or Tyler Biadasz, who also went to Washington, or Dan Quinn, who too went to Washington. Then they got Mike Zimmer for that. That may or may not be a good thing. Anyway, the 24th pick in the draft could be addressed with maybe a running back, because Tony Pollard went to Tennessee. Not that you should draft any of these running backs in the first round. Or maybe you can go with a receiver because Michael Gallup is out. Dallas lost a lot of talent from a 12-win team. Well, what can Dallas do to replace any of it? Maybe they go offensive line, perhaps, because they could certainly use a center and or left tackle of the future. Plus, Tyler Smith is ready to jump into that role. And the last team I'm going to talk about here are the Browns, who, unlike the previous three teams, they didn't have a loss that was terrible. But like the other three teams, they did get pummeled, and they did get blown out. It was not great. Yes, Houston crushed them. Houston got their leg back for a win they had in Houston earlier this season, where Amari Cooper almost set the receiving record for yardage. But there's no shame in Cleveland losing this game because by the time that happened, Joe Flacco was their fourth quarterback that actually started the game for them. They lost to Deshaun Watson midway through the season and somehow found a way to make it happen. They lost Nick Chubb in week 2 of the season, and they still got it done. Kevin Stefanski was coach of the year. Myles Garrett had an incredible year and finally won Defensive Player of the Year. They found a way, and that should be commended, not laughed at. But the Browns now are in a very rough spot. What do you do with Deshaun Watson? Cleveland found a way to play better without him than they did with him, and that's been the case since he got to Cleveland. That's saying something, considering the price they gave up. Now, the Browns would have had the 23rd pick in the draft. That pick obviously went to Houston in the Watson trade, but then Houston flipped it to Minnesota to move back in round 2. Browns' first pick coming up this year is going to be at pick 54. Now, I don't think Cleveland has too many major holes to truly address, because what do you really do here? They signed Jameis Winston to be the QB2 and let Joe Flacco walk to Indianapolis. And I think Cleveland's in decent shape there. They should get Joe Bitonio back, who was an excellent offensive lineman. They got to Darius Smith. They kept him to be the nice secondary edge rusher on the opposite side of Garrett. Good look there. Jordan Hicks is a very good middle linebacker. They did good work there. Adam Troutman, I like him as a second tight end. He and Jerry Jeudy are coming from Denver. Jeudy was a trade. Although paying Jerry Jeudy may or may not be a good thing. That may come back to bite them. Anyway, the Browns have made some solid moves. Shelby Harris is another former Bronco, by the way. He's coming to the Browns. They made some solid moves to keep things afloat and or improve in some spots. Will Cleveland make it back to the playoffs? I think it's very possible. And with that stop in Cleveland, the home of SummerSlam, ironically, that is the last stop of this train of thought. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the divisional round teams. The Packers, the Texans, the Bucks, and the Bills. That is the order of which I'm going to talk about them in. And from there, I'll have to ask the question, where do they go from here?